Welcome to Module 8. Writing the CPG Manuscript. The following are the module objectives. What is a CPG manuscript? The final CPG manuscript is the documentation of the methods and results of the CPG development process. The writing of the final manuscript is the responsibility of the steering committee, the technical lead, and the technical writer. The goals of writing the manuscript are transparency and credibility. The manuscript should describe the guideline development process that transpired, clearly and accurately. This process should reflect the standard, quality guideline, and development methodology. The recommendations and the basis for such should be written clearly and with sufficient detail. As the guidelines are developed, a draft of the manuscript may be started and expanded as the process progresses. It is ideal to employ only a single technical writer to draft the guidelines, and that the writer is involved throughout the duration of the guideline development. Hence, the writer should be identified at the beginning of the guideline development process. While the evidence summaries, including the synthesis of the discussions during the guideline panel meeting, is the responsibility of the evidence reviewers, the technical writer collates, reorganizes, and copy edits them to ensure standardization of the writing style and format of the entire manuscript. The final CPG manuscript must follow a standardized format with specific structure, headings, and content. In order to ensure that the manuscript contains the essential contents of a good guideline, several checklists are available to guide CPG developers, as shown in the last column of the table. The parts of the CPH manuscript will be described in the succeeding slides. Disclaimer. This section contains the statement of the limitation on the use of the guidelines. Executive summary. This contains a brief overview of the guideline development process and the list of recommendation statements. Abbreviations and acronyms. Contain all the abbreviations and acronyms in the document. While there are well-known or accepted abbreviations and acronyms, it is also possible that the CPG team may be introducing new abbreviations or acronyms in the CPG document. Corresponding CPG developer. This is the contact information of the person in charge for addressing queries regarding the CPG. This is usually the steering committee chair. Background. Contains the description of the health problem. Guideline objectives. Target population. End users and settings. CPG task force, working groups, and members. Title, roles, area of expertise, institutional affiliation. And COI classification of each task force members. Methodology. Contains the following: formulation and prioritization of guideline questions. Outcome selection and rating. Review process/systematic review methods. Search methods. Evidence selection criteria. Risk of bias assessment methods. Data synthesis. Assessment of the certainty of the body of evidence, and evidence to decision process or how consensus was defined and achieved, and voting rules. Evidence and recommendations. Include specific recommendations, rationale, or justification for recommendations, and evidence summary. Quality assurance process, internal and external review, are described in the review and QA of the CPG manuscript. Funding resources and role of the funder, declaration, and management of conflicts of interest, what types of conflicts relevant to the CPG development, how COI were evaluated and managed, are all described in the funding, declaration, and management of interest section. In Application and Implementation section, Facilitators and Barriers to Application or Compliance to the Recommendations, including how these factors were sought, implementation advice/tools, resource implications, and monitoring and auditing criteria are discussed. Access, where and how CPG and its appendices may be accessed, recommendations for future research, gaps in evidence, suggestions, limitations of the guideline, updating procedure, are described in the Other Information section of the manuscript. Finally, the reference section. The contents of this section are in your screen. Again, here are the parts of a CPG manuscript. Session 8.3, Review and Quality Assurance. Internal review of the CPG manuscript is necessary to ensure that the guideline developer's intentions are accurately reflected and justifications for recommendations are adequately explained. The steering committee is primarily responsible for this step. Once the technical writer completes the first draft of the CPG manuscript, the steering committee chair circulates the document to the rest of the SC members for review and comment. The technical writer then collates comments from the group and forwards it to the SC chair for incorporation into the draft. The chair then revises the CPG draft until a second draft is approved for external review. After internal review, the revised CPG manuscript should undergo external review. The main purpose of the external review is to assess the methodological rigor, validity, of the guideline development process and the acceptability and feasibility of the recommendations. External reviews are helpful in 1. Checking the accuracy, comprehensiveness, balance of the scientific evidence, 2. Checking the validity of the rationale for recommendations, 3. Obtaining feedback on the clarity and feasibility of recommendations, and 4. Engaging stakeholders to participate in the guideline development process. The final version of the CPG manuscript, after taking into consideration issues that arose from the internal and external review, is prepared for submission to the DOH for review and approval. An operational manual describing the detailed DOH process for CPG review and approval is available from DOH. In brief, the National Practice Guidelines Program Secretariat overseen by the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau of the DOH screens the CPG manuscript based on the Institute of Medicine, IOM, definition of the trustworthy guideline. The definition includes the following: it is based on a systematic review of the existing evidence, developed by a knowledgeable, multidisciplinary panel of experts and representatives from key affected groups. Consider important patient subgroups and patient preferences as appropriate, based on an explicit and transparent process that minimizes distortions, biases, and conflicts of interest, provide a clear explanation of the logical relationships between alternative care options and health outcomes, and provide ratings of both the quality of evidence and the strength of recommendations, and up to date, published within 5 years, or revised as appropriate when important new evidence warrants modifications of recommendations. Eligible submissions are appraised using the Agree-to tool by the NPGP Secretariat. CPGs that meet the 75% score across all the domains of the Agree-to appraisal are endorsed to the Secretary of Health, designated as DOH-approved CPG, and included in the online compendium.